My best friend slept with my fiancé and mocked me for being too slow in life. The day my life split in two. The first time my life shattered was on a rainy Thursday in Brooklyn, New York. The second time was when I realized my best friend was smiling while it happened. I stood outside Michael's apartment, engagement ring still warm in my pocket, rehearsing how I'd surprise him with dinner plans. The door was unlocked. I pushed it open, calling his name softly. That's when I heard laughter. Not just any laughter, Cynthia's laugh. The one I'd known since college. The one that used to comfort me after heartbreaks and bad exams. The laugh that now echoed from Michael's bedroom like a knife scraping bone. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I froze. The door was half open. I saw Cynthia tangled in my fiancé's sheets, wearing a silk robe I bought him in Los Angeles last Christmas. Michael's hands were on her waist. Her nails were digging into his back. Then Cynthia looked up and saw me.
She didn't panic.
She smiled. "Anita," she said lazily. "You're early." Michael turned. His face drained of color. He started talking, apologies, explanations, excuses, but Cynthia cut him off. "You're always so slow in life," she said, sitting up unashamed. "Slow to notice things. Slow to move. Honestly, I did you a favor." That sentence burned deeper than betrayal. I walked out quietly, my heart collapsing in on itself. But as I stepped into the rain, one thought anchored me. They think this is the end of my story. It isn't. Before I continue, please subscribe to my channel to see more interesting stories. Thank you. The silence that terrified them. I didn't confront them. That scared them more than screaming ever could. For weeks, I vanished from their lives. I stopped answering Cynthia's calls. I blocked Michael everywhere. I took unpaid leave from my job and drove from New York to Chicago, letting the highway swallow my tears. Pain has stages. Mine arrived in waves: grief, humiliation, rage. But underneath it all was clarity. I replayed every moment. Cynthia encouraging me to take it slow with Michael. Cynthia insisting I shouldn't rush marriage. Cynthia always knowing where Michael was. The betrayal wasn't sudden. It was planned. Back in Chicago, I stayed with my aunt and rebuilt my mind before my heart. I remembered something Cynthia always mocked me for: my patience, my habit of observing before acting. "Life rewards speed," she used to say. She was wrong. I quietly requested my engagement ring appraisal documents. I reviewed shared emails. I remembered Cynthia bragging about her connections in Dallas: real estate investors, finance men, social climbers. An idea began to form. Not revenge fueled by anger, but by truth. Meanwhile, Michael emailed nonstop. Cynthia sent messages dripping with fake concern. "You okay? We should talk. Please don't ruin our lives." I smiled for the first time in weeks. They weren't afraid of what I'd say. They were afraid of what I knew. And I knew everything was about to change. Cynthia got the life I deserved. 6 months later, Cynthia married fast. The man's name was Brandon Keller, a flashy real estate developer from Houston, Texas. He was wealthy, charming, and desperate to show the world he'd won. Cynthia invited me to the wedding. The audacity stunned me. She sent a long message about forgiveness, growth, destiny. She even added, "I hope you're not still stuck in the past." I attended, not for closure, for confirmation. The wedding was extravagant. White roses, champagne towers, drone cameras. Cynthia looked radiant. But I noticed what others didn't: the tension in Brandon's smile, the way Cynthia kept checking her phone. During the reception, she cornered me. "See," she whispered smugly. "Life rewards bold people, not slow ones." I raised my glass. "Congratulations." She mistook my calm for defeat. What Cynthia didn't know was that Brandon and I had already met weeks earlier during a professional consultation in San Diego. He had no idea who I was to her. And I hadn't lied. I had simply listened. That night, I watched her dance, fully believing she'd won. I left early, my heels clicking softly against marble floors, whispering a promise only I could hear. Enjoy the height, Cynthia. The fall is always louder. The thread she never saw coming. Revenge isn't loud. It's patient. I moved to San Francisco, accepted a consulting role in corporate compliance, and quietly rebuilt my career. Numbers don't lie. People do. Through Brandon's company records, public filings, investor decks, I noticed inconsistencies. Inflated valuations. Missing disclosures. Risk masked as confidence. I didn't expose him. I didn't warn Cynthia. I simply stepped back. Markets correct themselves. So do lies. Brandon's project stalled. Investors pulled out. Lawsuits surfaced. Stress hollowed him out. Cynthia began calling again, this time without arrogance. Marriage is hard, she said, voice cracking. You understand, right? I almost laughed. Michael, too, reappeared, divorced, struggling, irrelevant. He wanted forgiveness. Closure. A second chance. I gave neither. Instead, I focused on myself, buying a small condo, investing wisely, healing deeply. My silence became proof that I'd moved on. But healing doesn't mean forgetting. One evening, I received an email forwarded accidentally by Brandon's assistant. Documents Cynthia had submitted to banks. They were altered. I leaned back in my chair, heart steady. The universe wasn't asking me to destroy her. It was asking me whether I'd let truth do its job. When the mask finally cracked, the divorce was brutal. Brandon filed first in Texas, citing fraud, misrepresentation, and emotional manipulation. Cynthia lost everything: access, credibility, comfort. The woman who once mocked me for being too slow was now scrambling, selling designer bags online, couch surfing between friends who suddenly didn't pick up. Then came the knock on my door in San Francisco. Cynthia stood there thinner, eyes hollow, pride stripped bare. I need you, she whispered, tears spilling freely. I lost everything. Please forgive me. I studied her carefully, not with anger, with clarity. This wasn't the climax. This was the pause before it. Because forgiveness isn't about weakness. And consequences don't always arrive wearing anger. Sometimes they arrive wearing truth. She begged and I didn't answer. Cynthia stood in my doorway, like a ghost of the woman I once knew. Her hair was dull, her hands trembling, her voice small. I know I hurt you, she said. But I'm drowning, Anita. Please, just say something. I didn't invite her in. Silence has weight. I let it press down on her. Forgiveness, I'd learned, is not a reflex. It's a choice. And I wasn't ready to give her comfort when she hadn't earned accountability. I can't help you, I said calmly. Not like this. Her face crumpled. So you're punishing me? I shook my head.
No, Cynthia.
I'm respecting myself. She left sobbing, barefoot on cold concrete. I closed the door and leaned against it, heart pounding. Not with guilt, but with certainty. That night, an email landed in my inbox. From Keller Legal Team. Subject: Request for professional testimony. Brandon's attorneys wanted a compliance consultant to verify financial inconsistencies, someone credible, neutral. Someone like me. The universe has a sense of timing that borders on poetic. I didn't chase revenge. I didn't engineer destruction. I simply stopped protecting people who never protected me. And sometimes that's enough. Michael tried to rewrite history. Michael found me in Oakland, outside a quiet cafe overlooking the bay. He looked older, smaller. The confidence that once filled rooms now leaked out of him like air from a punctured tire. I should have chosen you, he said, eyes glassy. Cynthia was a mistake. I laughed. Not cruelly, truthfully. You didn't make a mistake, I replied. You made a decision. He reached for my hand. I pulled back. You loved the version of me that waited. I continued. But you chased the version of her that rushed. That's who you are. He swallowed hard. She ruined my life. No, I said softly. You did. As I walked away, I realized something important. Michael was no longer part of the story. He was just proof that betrayal always circles back to its source. Behind me, the bay shimmered, wide, endless, forward-moving.
So was I.
When the courtroom lights turned on, the courtroom in Houston was colder than I expected. Cynthia sat at the defendant's table, shoulders hunched, eyes darting like a trapped animal. When she saw me enter as an independent expert witness, her breath caught. She hadn't known. I took the stand with steady hands and a steady voice. I spoke only facts, documents altered, disclosures omitted, patterns too consistent to ignore. I didn't accuse. I didn't editorialize. Truth doesn't need drama. Cynthia's lawyer objected repeatedly. The judge overruled every time. When it was over, Cynthia collapsed into her chair, tears streaking her face. Our eyes met briefly. There was no triumph in me, only closure. For the first time, the story wasn't about betrayal. It was about accountability. The night she finally told the truth. Weeks later, Cynthia called again. I don't want money, she said quietly. I just need to say it. We met in a small diner in Sacramento. No makeup, no masks, no audience. I hated how peaceful you were, she confessed. I thought stealing your life would make me feel powerful. I listened. Not to forgive, but to understand. And now? I asked. She looked down. Now I know I was never competing with you. I was running for myself. That was the first honest thing she'd ever said. What patience really looks like. I didn't save Cynthia. I didn't destroy her either. I let life answer her arrogance with reality. Months later, I stood on my balcony in San Francisco, city lights blinking like quiet applause. I had peace.
Stability. Purpose.
Cynthia sent one last message. You were never slow. You were just moving in the right direction. I didn't reply. Because the most powerful revenge isn't watching someone fall. It's standing tall when they finally understand why you rose. When I stopped being the villain in her story. There's a strange peace that comes when you realize you're no longer defending yourself. I felt it one morning in Marin County, watching fog lift slowly from the hills as I sipped coffee on my balcony. For the first time in years, Cynthia's name didn't tighten my chest. She had tried to rewrite the narrative. Telling mutual friends I was cold, vengeful, heartless. But stories lose power when truth has already settled in. People began calling me quietly. I didn't know the whole story. You were stronger than we thought. I never corrected anyone. I didn't need to. Meanwhile, Cynthia's world continued shrinking. Job interviews ended abruptly. Old friends avoided her calls. Her reputation followed her like a shadow she couldn't outrun. One night, she posted a quote online. Sometimes the people you hurt the most end up hurting you back. I stared at it for a long moment. Then I whispered, No, Cynthia. Life did. The offer that tested my heart. The call came from New York, a promotion. A senior leadership role. Bigger influence. Bigger money. As I celebrated quietly, another message slipped in. From Cynthia. I got an offer, rehab counseling certification. But I can't afford the fees. I know I don't deserve help from you, but I'm asking anyway. I sat in silence for a long time. This was the moment people talk about, the fork in the road where revenge becomes mercy or cruelty becomes kindness. I didn't owe her anything, but I owed myself peace. I replied with one sentence. I won't pay for your past, but I'll support your future once. I transferred the fee anonymously. No note, no meeting, no forgiveness speech. Because compassion doesn't require reconciliation. And strength doesn't need witnesses. Michael watched me from afar. Michael reached out one last time after reading an article about my promotion. I always knew you'd end up here, he wrote. That was the lie he told himself. He hadn't known. He hadn't believed. He hadn't stayed. I didn't reply. In Seattle, where he now lived, Michael was just another man haunted by the woman he underestimated. I hoped he healed. But healing no longer involved me. The day Cynthia finally broke. A year later, Cynthia called me from a payphone in Phoenix. I'm not asking for anything, she said, voice trembling. I just need to say this out loud. I listened. I blamed you because it was easier than facing who I was. You weren't slow, Anita. You were steady, and I hated that. Tears soaked the line between us. I'm proud of you, she whispered. That was the moment her punishment ended. Not because I forgave her, but because she finally told the truth without expecting anything back. What survival really teaches you. Success doesn't always roar. Sometimes it arrives quietly, through stability, clarity, and self-respect. Standing in my new office overlooking Manhattan, I realized something simple and profound. The greatest revenge wasn't watching Cynthia fall. It was realizing I never needed her downfall to rise. I had outgrown the story, where betrayal defined me. And somewhere behind me, far, far behind, two people who once mocked my pace were still trying to catch up. The invitation no one expected. The invitation arrived on thick ivory paper, embossed with gold lettering. National Women in Leadership Summit, keynote speaker, Anita Hall. Location, Los Angeles, California. I stared at it for a long moment, memories flooding back. Cynthia mocking my slow life, Michael choosing thrill over depth. I accepted, not to prove anything, but because I'd earned the right to speak. The night before the summit, my assistant casually mentioned that several nonprofits would be present, including a rehabilitation program from Arizona. Cynthia's program. For the first time in years, our paths were about to cross again. Not in pain, not in desperation, but under bright lights and unforgiving truth. I slept peacefully. Some endings don't need preparation. They arrive when the work is already done. She sat in the back row. The auditorium was packed. Women, leaders, investors, cameras flashing. I walked onto the stage to applause that felt unreal. As I scanned the room, I saw her. Cynthia sat in the very last row, shoulders tight, hands folded like she was afraid to take up space. She didn't wave. She didn't smile. She just listened. I spoke about patience mistaken for weakness, about betrayal that sharpens vision, about choosing integrity when shortcuts look tempting. I never said her name, but every word found her. When the applause rose, Cynthia cried silently. No dramatics, no performance. Just truth landing exactly where it belonged. The question that changed everything. During the Q&A, a woman stood up. "What do you do?" she asked, voice shaking. "When someone destroys your life and asks for forgiveness." The room went silent. I knew Cynthia was holding her breath. I answered slowly. "You don't forgive to erase consequences. You forgive to release yourself." Accountability and compassion can exist in the same room, but they don't share the same seat. The room erupted in applause. In the back row, Cynthia bowed her head. That was the moment she finally understood. I had never been slow. I had been prepared. When she finally let me go. After the summit, Cynthia waited outside. "I won't ask you to forgive me," she said softly. "I just wanted to say thank you for not becoming bitter." I studied her. She looked older, but lighter. "I didn't survive to punish you," I replied. "I survived to live." She nodded, tears in her eyes. But this time, there was no desperation.
No envy.
Just acceptance. We hugged briefly. And then we walked in opposite directions. That was the real goodbye. The life I built without them. I moved into a sunlit home in Santa Monica, waves crashing softly outside my window. My life was full. Work that mattered, love that was patient, peace that was unshakable. Michael sent a congratulatory message I never opened. Cynthia started rebuilding, slowly, honestly, quietly. And me? I finally understood the truth they mocked me for. Slow isn't weak. Slow is intentional. Slow is unstoppable. The call from the past I never expected. The call came from an unknown number on a quiet Sunday morning in Santa Monica. "Anita, it's Cynthia." Her voice was calm, but fragile in a way I'd never heard before. I've been asked to speak, she said, at a recovery conference in Denver. They want me to talk about accountability, about choices. I stayed silent. I wouldn't be here if it wasn't for you, she continued. Not because you saved me, but because you didn't. That sentence lingered in the air. She wasn't asking for approval. She wasn't asking for forgiveness. She was asking for permission to finally stand alone. You don't need my blessing, I said gently. Just tell the truth. She exhaled, like someone laying down a burden they'd carried too long. When the call ended, I realized something startling. Her redemption no longer threatened my peace. That's how I knew I was truly free. When the world finally heard her confession, the video went viral. Cynthia stood on a modest stage in Denver. No makeup, no glamour, just truth. I've betrayed the one person who loved me without competition, she said into the microphone. And life taught me that shortcuts don't lead to happiness. They lead to hollow victories. She spoke about arrogance disguised as confidence, about stealing someone else's life and losing her own in the process. She never blamed me. She blamed herself. Comments poured in, some cruel, some compassionate, but one thing was clear. The woman who once mocked my pace was now teaching the cost of rushing. And somehow that felt right. Michael's final realization. I heard about Michael through mutual acquaintances. He'd watched the video too. They said he sat alone in his apartment in Seattle, replaying it over and over, finally understanding that both women he lost weren't enemies. They were mirrors. He sent one final message. You were the best thing I ever had. I just didn't deserve the time you offered. I read it. And then I deleted it. Some lessons don't need responses. The life that came after the storm. 2 years later, I stood on a cliffside in Big Sur, wind threading through my hair. Beside me stood a man who didn't rush me,
Didn't compete with me.
didn't mistake patience for weakness. My life was rich, not just in success, but in alignment. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who believed being slow was a flaw. She was wrong. Slow meant intentional. Slow meant unshakable. Slow meant I arrived whole. Far away, Cynthia was rebuilding quietly.
No spotlight. No shortcuts.
That was her penance.
And her peace.
The poetic justice of it all. People often ask me how I got my revenge. I tell them I didn't. I got my life. The woman who betrayed me lost everything chasing speed. The man who chose thrill lost depth. And I, the one they mocked for being slow, ended up exactly where I was meant to be. Whole. Respected. At peace. Because the most powerful justice isn't watching someone fall. It's watching them finally understand, while you've already moved on. Thank you for listening to my story. Please don't forget to like, subscribe, and share my videos.
Thank you.